Buongiorno a tutti, scusate.
Good morning. We apologize for our 15-minute delay. We were waiting for people to arrive in this wonderful place in Vicenza. I'm very happy today to be able to chair this meeting organized by Vitevis out of several reasons. The first one relates to Vitevis itself, this cooperative group which, and I'm not exaggerating, is one of the groups that over the past years has done best in achieving wonderful results, not only in quantitative terms, but also in terms of its social commitment, which is fully in line with what it proposes today, sustainability. You know that sustainability is extraordinary from the viewpoint of it being very strategic. Unfortunately, though, for a long time, it has suffered the fact that communication was based more on suggestions and emotions rather than facts. And now we should really stop paying lip service to this topic and be factual. Vitevis boasts by now a long story and history in this field, 10 years of work that testify to very practical decisions and results. So much so that it is really on the cutting edge in terms of production in relation to sustainability, which is a multifaceted topic. I'm not going to be the one kicking off this very interesting round table today. It is not only people physically present who follow us today. We also have 100 people following the proceedings remotely. And actually, this is the good outcome, if any, of the pandemic. Now, Silvano Di Colato, the president of Vitevis, is with us today, and I would kindly ask him to introduce the day and to bring to us the regards of his cooperative and its members. Silvano, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to you all, and welcome. I would like this to be a sort of family reunion. It is true that we also have people connected remotely, but we also include them in our virtual family today. This is a process that we started some years ago. Many things have changed since then. We innovated the way by which we communicate. That also includes online streaming meetings. And so now we have hybrid events. And you see, in the wine growing sector, we were forced to ask a number of questions about climate change, about the impact, so that we can maximize all resources in the vineyard. What happens is that when you're there and work in the vineyard, you tend to work slowly, but this slowness, in a way, is conducive to thinking and reasoning about things. When we have scholars telling us about wine growers, you see, my grandfather used to say, that old agronomic practices would come to the fore over and over again. And if we combine that with technology, of course, we benefit from that. Wine growing is a family thing. It is linked to individuals, to families. It has changed because, of course, wine growers, vintners have changed. And they also learned a lot through technology. We are fully aware, though, of the fact that we do not have infinite resources. We must exploit them at best, and we need to use what Mother Nature gives us. Having Mother Nature as an ally is fundamental. At Vitevis, we started first and foremost observing and recording what is done in the vineyard and tried to analyze where there was room for improvement. Then, you see, this project has involved so many people, and we were nicely surprised to see that our land is indeed a land with a vocation for wine growing, but it is something which derives from nature itself. And when we addressed our members, we saw that they were eager to participate. Involving 1,000 people in these projects, of course, is a lot of work. You have to motivate people. You have to make people understand that we need to join efforts to counter climate change, and you need also to try and anticipate the situation. And I would like simply to give a message, if I may. That is that the wine growing that we want to practice, this model is something that wants to leave a mark. Oftentimes, we speak about prints, about marks, meaning that you leave something behind that remains. But we want to be as little invasive as possible. We want to leave something which is fully in harmony with nature, something which enriches a territory, something which gives prospects to many families. This is the work that we want to do, and we are happy to share it with you today. Thank you, Mr. Nicolato. Thank you. You introduced wonderfully the topic of this morning and also made it clear how significant the work of Vitevis is. We have to be strict in terms of the timing of the agenda, also because we have 3 people connected remotely. I would say that the title, Good Wines for Our Earth, Soil and Land, the Italian term terra covers all these English terms, entails that we are committed to respecting the land, and that also goes for respecting final consumers. If we keep our environment healthy, then we will all have a future. Thank you, Silvano. And you see, he has now to leave the place to the next speaker because we have only 2 people on stage throughout the morning. Now, I would kindly ask Aurelio Bauknecht from Leighton to take the floor, and I call him on stage. Over the past days, we had the opportunity of getting to know each other, and I think that he is really the right person who can help us understand sustainability in terms of its historical evolution. And this is the reason why he introduces the proceedings. He will also connect that to the market. Yesterday, we had a wonderful dinner, and he told us during the dinner how marketing is important in order to forge the right perception of sustainability on the market. So you have 15 to 20 minutes maximum to make this presentation. Normally, he speaks for 1 hour and a half, so thank you so much for being brief. Well, thanks to you. I am an agri-food marketer, and I'm also a narrator of sustainability in markets, trade in general. That includes marketing, of course. Once in a while, I'm invited to various contexts, as is the case today, to frame concepts with an entrepreneurial perspective. Sustainability clearly is a part of this culture of entrepreneurial culture, because it encompasses so many values which are largely still unexplored and untold. I would like now to tell you about the history of sustainability. You see that the title is The Histories of Markets and Sustainability from Ancient Times to the Future, Traces of Value for Wine Growing, for Viticulture. Value is the key word here. This is a date, as a matter of fact, and it is symbolic, 2022. Is it meaningful to talk about sustainability today? Should we really speak about being green and sustainability, since everybody speaks about them, and this might sound old and overused? Well, of course, the answer is yes, it is meaningful. We need to talk about sustainability, because the more we speak about it in an authoritative way, the better. Therefore, I would like to congratulate Vitevis on its decision to talk about sustainability this year, because 2022 is a very significant year from this viewpoint. We citizens and you consumers and users all suffer the impact of climate change. I will not dwell upon that. I will dwell upon a number of topics which were very meaningful this year and which have not received full attention, unfortunately. This is an extraordinary anniversary. Very few people know it, but this is an anniversary year that everyone in the agri-food business should know. We have here Karl Bosch, a chemist, who, together with Meyer in 2022, basically invented the industrial synthesis of urea, which is the main asset for the sector all over the world. It is a fertilizer which was produced in terms or in quantities of 100 million tons per year until last year, which is an incredible amount. It is at the very basis of the protocol of fertilization. Mr. Bosch should be honored and paid a tribute to, along with Pasteur, Sampelli, and others who did so much in the field of chemistry for the impact of his work on our life. Despite this, I would say that very few people are aware of the anniversary. What about urea? Urea turns 100 years old today. 100 years is a long time, which means the technology has changed over this time span. I would like to ask you the following. Would a farmer be available to use a tractor from 1922, model 703? Or would a lorry driver be ready to transport from Sicily to Brenner products as he did 100 years ago? Or let's ask a person who, whether he or she would like to make a journey using a car from 1922. And this is actually pictures from that time.
So, of course, they would answer no. But if you ask the same question about urea, the opposite answer is obtained. For some strange reasons, this technology, urea, is still cherished by many farmers. And there is a sort of reservation vis-à-vis technological innovation. There has been such an innovation, nitrogen fixating bacteria. Well, these are all new technologies that make an increase in yields and sustainability possible, and yet it's not so easy to introduce such technologies. It's a question of business as usual. We don't want to deny the past. On the contrary, we have to glorify the past that has made our Western lives so easy. We need to acknowledge Karl Bosch and many others. At the same time, we must be able to reinterpret this past through new techniques and new technologies. And in 2022, something has happened, and this was also forgotten. Our politicians, our lawmakers, have changed the Italian constitution last February. This is not for every day. The Article 9 and Article 41 have been amended. Article 9 covers the key principles of our republic. I have highlighted the pieces or the paragraphs that have been changed. Well, the republic protects the environment, the biodiversity, and also the animals. Animals' welfare has become a principle of our constitution. Article 41 is even more important. This is the very definition of a company. What is a business? In order to answer this question, we don't have just to leaf through a vocabulary to find for a definition. Well, the real definition is the one written in the Constitution. Article 41, it is a private business cannot take place against social security, cannot harm the safety and social dignity. Well, until then, you know, there was no addition to the health and the environment. So everything must be done in order to take good care of social matters and environmental ones. Well, the very definition of company has changed. Now, as of last February, a company is believed to be sustainable by definition. It is not possible to have a non-sustainable company. So the semantics has been changed, and the very meaning of this word has changed. For us, for elderly people, this is not an easy task. It's a question of erasing our old concepts and replace them with new ones. But mind you, this is going to be the norm for the new generations. They will start out in life with this definition in mind, and there can't be non-sustainable companies anymore. Now, let's move away from an historical and ethical approach, and let's approach a commercial question. In 2022, something else happened. ISMEA published data about the organic food consumption. Well, this has been published a couple of months ago. For the very first time, there is a major decline in the market. On the contrary, well, as compared to traditional food. Well, this may sound surprising because in the past years, you know, the headlines talked about major increases in the organic consumption. However, there is something wrong there. The data is biased, and this has become absolutely clear in 2022. Here comes the question: is sustainability paying off? Is it worth for companies to make investments in sustainability? Well, this is a futile question because, of course, companies have to be sustainable. One is not compelled to be self-employed or become a businessman. If you do that, if you wanted to become a member of a business, then by definition, one has to be sustainable. We have to come to terms with the market, the turnover markups, and also certification in functioning businesses. Sustainability is all important. It's not just a question of certification. So here, I'm not expecting to cover the marketing philosophy in a minute, but let me show you what happens in the conventional model. There is a promise to the customer, please buy my wine, which is better than anyone else, and I tell you why. For instance, it is well balanced. There's a good body, there's a good bouquet, and so on and so forth. And then supporting evidence to prove me right, to enhance the value of my promise. So in the certifications, awards, this is evidence and also claims and testimonials of other clients, and then the tone of a voice, positioning, and so on. However, some have completely reverted this process, and they believed that certification was enough to increase one's figures. That's why, in this case, supporting evidence is number one, but it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work. It can only work in a small niche of consumers where the mezzi fini reversal takes place. So one buys a product because it is nourishing, for instance. I'm talking about food. And then, of course, I like the supporting evidence and the reasons why. Or I buy a product because it is supported by certification. This is the mezzi fini reversal. So certification is a tool. It is a value-generating tool, but it is mistaken for the end. Means and ends are mistaken one for another. So this is not very successful on the market, especially due to the fact that the word sustainability has changed its meaning. Well, until 20 years ago, sustainable meant organic for consumers. Very few contents 20 years ago. Now there are 1,000 words: carbon footprint, water footprint, many other values, and sustainability has also been supported by some add-ons, such as economic sustainability, not only environmental, but also economic sustainability, and also the health consciousness. Well, sustainability is overlapping health consciousness. All marketeers must be aware of it. And also the perception of the present time, the words that we perceive in our minds are different from ever in the past and in the future. Here are some two very extreme examples. So in the history of Italian food, we moved away from gluten-containing pasta. So with the addition of gluten, now we have the gluten-free pasta. How was that possible? That's unbelievable. A time where gluten was a value, because the population was starving at the time. And now we have moved to a gluten-free pasta. This is the cream, the hazelnut spread, chocolate spread from 1951. If you read careful, if you read the label, you can find the reasons why one should buy this product. Well, it is a very high number of calories. The spread was sold not because it was very good, but because it had a very high number of calories. We were so hungry that this spread was meant to put on a weight. You know, putting on weight was very important back in 1951. Who would do that now? But indeed, we're talking about the same product. So, understanding the imagery and having in mind the storyline is very important. It's important for corporate culture and for culture, generally speaking. This is exactly what I'm concerned with. It is a subject that is very attractive to me. So, this picture is it's a symbol. It is a tipping point in the development of the concept of sustainability. This is the very first picture taken by a man, a picture of Earth. The mission was Apollo's 8, 1968. Well, please think of yourself as a citizen in 1968. I have an app where I am connected to the orbital shuttle and I can see the webcam. So you understand how much is available to us now. In 1968, citizens had never seen Earth like that. And for the very first time, citizens, thanks to NASA, realized how beautiful Earth is, this little grayish dot. Well, this picture has boosted the love for environment and sustainability. This picture was taken in 1972. It was taken during an Apollo's mission. It is the very first comprehensive view of Earth. It is an historical picture. If you don't remember it, I'm sure you've seen it anyway, and it is part of your imagery, and it is supported by a number of image-creating values. Well, I will not touch upon the first part of the 20th century. Well, just a hint at the dust ball. Steinbeck talked about this in a book called The Fury. Now I'm getting to another important milestone, 2015. Now, what happened back in 2015? Now, if we talk about beauty, technologies, war, or sex, or many other values, if we talk about the so-called archetypes, well, we will all feel comfortable addressing these issues. This is not the case with sustainability. We talk about food and fashion, technology forever. I mean, these are common subjects of conversation since we have been born. But this is not the case with sustainability. Sustainability is a very recent concept that made its way only in 19th century. It is a new concept that is not our second nature, unlike other similar concepts. There are many drivers that have made the sustainability semantics better known is religion. Religion also played a role. But it took a long time for a religion to do that. We perceive nature as an enemy. In the Middle Ages, nature was something to be tamed. The woods were to be uprooted in order to cultivate, and the mountains were unknown spaces to be feared. But this changed in the 19th century, and in 2015, the Catholic Church introduced Laudato Si charter by Pope. It is a very interesting writing. I suggest that you read it. This was also a turning point in the concept of sustainability, and also the Agenda 2030 by the UN was published in the same year. I jump ahead for the sake of brevity. I think my time is up, so I leave you with a question. So, is sustainability a veritable tsunami? Well, in the past it was a droplet, now it is a storm. All entrepreneurial businessmen have to deal with this tsunami. Can we survive a tsunami, or will be overwhelmed by it? This is my take-home message. So I'd like to expand later on if we have time, but for the time, I think that's all on my side. Thank you.
Grazie Aurelio.
Thank you very much, Aurelio. You were brief, and yet you have told us so much in order to plunge into the key concept of sustainability. And I think that you very correctly emphasized a concept which we often forget, which is recent, and we pay the cost of that in terms of what happens to consumers. TradeLab will present a survey tomorrow about choices of wine drinkers in Italy in relation to sustainability. Sustainability seems not to be so important in guiding choices because it is so complex and people do not understand its very value. So thank you very much for telling us fruitful things. The last question that Aurelio Bauchnecht asked in his contribution referred to the fact that wine growers play a very important part in terms of sustainability. And Giulio Somma from Corriere Vinicolo is indeed the right person to tell us about the perspective of the estates, the businesses, including their point and focus on sustainability. I think that he will be perfect in 15 minutes in telling us about the way by which the market and producers are working in the name of sustainability. Giulio, you have the floor. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you and good morning. And I would like to thank Vitevis for this very nice invitation. Congratulations for your very brave work. Thanks to President Nicolato. I would like to refer to what you said. When you started talking about grandparents, I got worried a bit because, you see, grandparents are important, but they also made a huge damage. So fine, but you should also think about technology. And then good wines, not only for consumers, but thanks to the ally, thanks to whom everything is possible. You see, it is Fabio's fault if I am fragmented in my presentation, because I have only 15 minutes. I can give you sort of headlines and tell you a bit some things, but it's only going to be inputs. If we have the time, we will go back to these topics. Change of the constitution, fundamental, of course, but in the constitution there are still so many wonderful things. This is something that we must be aware of. There is still room for improvement. Then the salon in Milan about CSR, wine for the first time ever has been included in this event, and it is really an extraordinary event in terms of brainstorming about sustainability. People talked about sustainability going from tribes in Ghana to air transport. This is really a dimension which is overarching. And greenwashing is the enemy here, because greenwashing, that is simply paying lip service to sustainability, is enemy number one. I will go back to that later on. Actually, before telling you about the three pillars, let me share with you something about the energy crisis, which is really a tragedy. The positive element only is the fact that companies were compelled to invest in sustainability. Without the war, everything would have been nicer, but it can also be that the environment would have been neglected even more. And now we are talking about sustainability, and this is positive within a very critical context, of course. Now, the three pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and governance. So ESG, sorry. Are related to a message that came from Milan. We have talked at length about the environment, but there is still a lot to do when it comes to social and governance. And again, there is a lot of greenwashing. It is not that you simply tick items on a checklist if you have a sustainability balance. It's not that easy. Sustainability must become a dimension of that entails that we think about sustainable results when balance is needed and useful, and its outcome is measured against or vis-à-vis the outcomes obtained. Wine. Wine is the most advanced sector in the farming sector. Agricoltura 100, which is an award, a competition promoted by Confagricoltura in Italy, interviewed more than 2,000 people, and the first awards were all given to wine. There are several reasons. I can't go into details. This is a very important result, and I wanted to briefly tell you about that. I received interesting data from Equalitas. You see, in 2017, there were 9 certified entities, which is really something that tells about the fact that sustainability is a fairly new concept. And then 16 in 2019 and 90 in 2021. In 2022, 180, and they will reach the number of 200 by the end of the year. There has been an exponential growth in 2 years. 21, we said 90, 200 this year, and an additional 260 organizations are ready to be certified, which tells us that over the time span of 4 years, the phenomenon has exploded. Well, for sure, you might say 400 estates out of millions bottling wine is not much. But if you consider the quantities and volumes, the number is significant, because these organizations make out for 25% of the business volume and 16% of the production, 7.8 million hectoliters. We know this sector. The first 100 producers make out the most of the production in Italy in terms of production and bottling. If it is there, then we have a concentration of organizations working for sustainability. This translates into very good outcomes. And talking with Director Stefanucci and colleagues, we said, well, why not simply certifying all top producers? Actually, we cannot, because this growth entailed that when the Qualitas standard was issued, organizations were already ready, and they certified something that had already happened. While in order to add the next 100 to 200 organizations, we will need to wait longer, because organizations that have not started that pathway yet, they will need to put money, to invest a lot of time as well, to get to the status which can be certified, which means that we will move from exponential growth to a slower growth. And yet, there is another positive element here, and the President hinted at that, which is the territorial dimension of sustainability, which is really the leap forward in terms of quality. You see, there have been many certifications, and in terms also of appellations which are certified. Prosecco is about to do so. It is an example of the fact that a widespread entity in terms of an organization present in a territory going for the certification is a very fruitful process, because all members then benefit from this approach. The spread of this sensitivity on the part of consortia and social cooperatives and so on and so forth will make it possible to accelerate this process even further in a very virtuous way. I was told that calculation systems are being devised to calculate the footprint, the ecological footprint for entire areas, and that is going to be serve as a basis for all producers who want to be individually certified. What we need is an overall approach encompassing Italy as a whole. Now, finally, after 2 years, we will have the issuance of the single sustainability standard, which again is only a starting point, and yet it is fundamental, because you see, Italy is one of the very few countries in the world that issued and adopted an accessible standard. Accessibility here is key in terms of making it possible for several producers to embrace the cause of sustainability. Controls have to be very, very strict. Criteria must be fixed and certain, and outcomes must be measurable. Well, together with the ministry, Vitevis is working so that in 2023, the instruments at the disposal of organizations be more stringent in order to be certified. And this also entails that we expand the SQ and PI approach. A major step forward has been made this year in this respect. We want to get to a logo for sustainability, because of course consumers need to see, to be communicated about the work which is done in the vineyard and in the cellar. If we do not do that, we lose also in terms of competition, because other countries already have their logo, so we need the logo. And you see, wine, and specifically so in Italy, in addition to having the three pillars we mentioned before, has a fourth one already. And it has been mentioned, which is the topic of drinking in a responsible way. So we have the three pillars that we said, the ESG basically elements, and then there is this fourth pillar, which is not always present, which is that of not abusing of alcohol, and this entails that producers should have a role in this, in educating consumers. The World Health Organization is attacking wine at world level and also in Europe. Think of the latest resolution in Tel Aviv. And it is something which creates concerns because it can entail a crisis for the market. In addition, we have the problem that the cultural dimension of our produce is not recognized, which is a distinctive feature of wine vis-à-vis other beverages, so to say. And we have a unique culture here, a unique tradition. The features are absolutely distinctive when compared to industrial beverages. If that is not recognized, if that is actually denied with a perspective whereby everything is reduced to alcohol content, then that is really a problem. I'm about to conclude, Fabio. Communication. We talked about a tsunami earlier on, and indeed a tsunami cancels everything. I will go back to what the previous speaker said and add that it is very true that oftentimes we have a communication tsunami whereby people become indifferent to something. If you are bombarded with a specific word or slogan, you don't want to hear it any longer and change channel or turn page. And in our sector, you see, and we know that from a recent survey, it is not so that sustainability is not communicated, because producers do communicate about their effort for sustainability. Bigger producers are very serious in going for certification and communicating this. And yet there is also another group of organizations in between, so to say, between those who communicate and those who do but do not communicate. And it is the group of producers who go for greenwashing only.
We, as journalists, are responsible for covering, providing coverage. Well, if a press release comes from a sponsor or a friend, is not shouldn't be misused. I mean, if you recover 3 corks, that's not a cyclical economy. So there is an intermediate strip where there is no certification and companies go each one their own way. Well, you have to be very careful because, you know, the numbers go up, but they don't reflect the reality. It is up to us, dear Fabio. You've written this, and I'm speaking up. I'm saying this very clearly. We are responsible for sorting news. In our newspaper, for the past 2 years, we have a feature article about sustainability, and we don't publish news that we receive, but we check them out. Well, investments, concrete commitments, a number of people involved, and measurement of results and projects that have been successful. If these requirements are covered, that's fine. Otherwise, it is greenwashing. There is no awareness that one should be responsible for communicating responsibility. Today, you will have a Professor Sobrero. You are lucky enough to have her with you. She has invented communication, so I will add nothing. Let me say that there are a few companies that do good communication. Others are doing greenwashing, and that's all. This is one very final question. What is the market response to all the above commitments? Fabio said it very clearly. Our newspaper has launched a world survey about the largest international markets. 3 questions. What are sustainable wines? Second, are they available? What their cost? And is the consumer ready to pay a premium price? So international consumers are, of course, sensitive to the question of social responsibility and sustainability of wine and packaging, whether they are not ready to pay a premium price. UK, US, Germany, but also Nordic countries have been investigated. And with sustainable wine, the markets, the green is an all-inclusive word: eco-friendly, organic, green, natural, vegan, non-sugar added, free from. So wines that don't have something, they are part of this big cluster of the so-called sustainable wines. And of course, we don't understand what's the difference between organic and sustainable. Young people are sensitive to environment-related questions. So the others, more adult population is interested in organic for health reasons, but there is no international standard clarifying what is to be meant by a sustainable wine. If it is only a question of money, they are not ready to spend more. So consumers are looking for those wines, but they don't understand why they charge more. So why should we invest on sustainability? Because it's going to become a must. It's not going to be a choice in a while. In the near future, the sustainability will become a requirement to be able to stay on the market. So even if you don't have a short-term return on investment, you have to invest anyway, longer term. And then research carried out by some university showed the following. Why are we looking for sustainable wines? Because when asked how is a wine made, the industry is unable to answer. Transparency is needed. It's not enough to take the guests or people to the vineyards, because the wine is not made in a vineyard. The wine is made in the cellar. So we must be able to explain that our wines are natural because they are the result of grape fermentation. Thank you.
Beh, Giulio, grazie anche.
Giulio, thank you so much for having stressed a number of sustainability-related issues. Now, you know, the mistakes are made in portraying the question of sustainability. Sustainability, in my opinion, requires that the production approach and the production practices must be changed. And we, the press, we have to inquire the different requirements in terms of management. Well, this is a cultural revolution. Well, it is certification is just a part of it. It is something that led to something dangerous. What I mean is that many companies are thinking of being able to self-certify or auto-certify and tell the public what they do in terms of sustainability. And they think that they're trump of certification is more convincing than any other protocols or practices. However, this only leads to more confusion, adds more confusion. And the Sonoma University said something very undeniable, that is, there is a little transparency in the communication of wine. Well, what is needed in order to do a better job is the competence. You can disseminate information if you know what you're talking about. And the second one is the freedom of thought that cannot be harnessed or restrained by sponsors or other limiting factors, because if we did that, that would be the end. Well, I have given some comments in order to buy time, because we have Sarah Norrell. So I introduced Sarah Norrell. Giulio talked how the markets are responding to different wines. She is responsible for System Bolagert, that is the institute that is in charge of imports of wines and alcoholic beverages into Sweden. So she is the best person to share her vision and to tell us what is taking place in the Nordic countries.
With us. Good morning, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. So I don't know if you can see this beautiful theater. I hope that next time you will be in Vicenza.
I can't.
Yeah, you must come here. It's really beautiful place. So first of all, I want to thank you very much, because for us it's very important to have you in this conference, because we are talking about sustainable in the wine system. And I believe that Sweden is the market that maybe you start earlier compared with other markets to understand the importance of the sustainability in the wine production. So first of all, could you give us some impression regarding the evolution of the sustainable wines in the System Bolaget system? So just to start, to give us some your idea, impression about this important subject.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And sorry I can't speak Italian very well, but I understood that it was a lot of sustainability in the introduction you did and the gentleman speaking before you. So, of course, sustainability is very, very much in the core and the heart of Systembolaget and what we do. And I don't know, but Swedes tend to be very, very much into nature and into doing good for the nature. So maybe that's why we have sustainability, and we like to think and want to be in the forefront of what's happening in sustainability. And why we do it? It's because our customers, our owners, the Swedish state, and also the employees of Systembolaget, they believe and require that we should be in the forefront, that we should do our part when it comes to saving the planet, because it is in a state where it should not be, and we need to reverse the how things are developing. So that's why we are in this, and we talked about. I think I've been with you before, and you know that the journey we've done with organic, where Italy has been a great contributor. Every fourth bottle is still being organic when sold in Sweden, and a big part of that comes from Italy, since Italy is still the most important wine producer, for delivering wines to the Swedish market. And what's very much on the agenda, I would say, every morning I listen to the radio news, I open up a newspaper, or I read on the internet. It's about climate change. So this is something we've been talking a lot about during the last couple of years. And how can we be part in doing our bits when it comes to reversing the curve of climate emissions? So we just took the science-based target, which is a science-based way of calculating backwards. If we are to take our part in the climate emissions, we need to cut our emissions by 50% until 2030 in comparison with 2019, 2020. And obviously, we can't do that without you, because about 75% of Systembolaget's total emissions lies in cultivation, production, and packaging. Packaging being 25% of that. And we are continue working with organic, we are continue working with lightweight packaging, and to go more for PET, smaller boxes, tetras, pouches, and lightweight bottles are sort of for the future, possibly the limit for where we could even accept a bottle or a packaging in the future. Because a glass bottle is today 8 times the emissions in comparison with other types of packaging. Obviously, that can change in the future if we have electric plants for making bottles, but today it's usually gas or even carbon, or at least those types of fuels. Before I give the words back to you, I would like also to say that we have, since March, and maybe some of you know about it, we have a new way of helping the consumer to make sustainable choice. Not only lightweight packaging or the organic, but we also have a clear marking on the shelf in the stores, but also on the internet, for sustainable choice. So that's a more holistic. It's not only organic. It's not only lightweight packaging, but it's also how things has been handled in terms of working conditions. So it's more of a holistic choice, and that's doing well.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry, I have to translate quickly.
Sorry.
But no, don't worry, because I think mostly of the people, they understood you very well, but I prefer to point it out something very important. You said, per chi non avesse, diciamo, compreso fino in fondo, diciamo che Sara Nore del Systembolaget ha evidenziato tre aspetti fondamentali. Il primo, che ormai la scelta anche del monopolio svedese nei confronti di tutto quello che è l'universo dei vini sostenibili è una scelta irrevocabile, che ormai ha preso gran parte, diciamo, delle loro scelte. Tanto che poi è anche strutturata all'interno di quella che è la filosofia del Systembolaget, cioè anche loro stanno diventando sempre più una realtà sostenibile, quindi devono garantire che al loro interno e quindi dei loro prodotti, nella selezione dei loro prodotti ci sia questo aspetto. Altro elemento fondamentale, è vero che l'organic, cioè il vino biologico, è stato il driver più importante, quello iniziale, ma oggi questo concetto di sostenibilità si è allargato a vari altri aspetti, sul sociale, la sicurezza sul posto del lavoro, ovviamente la salute. Il packaging gioca un ruolo molto importante, ma come giustamente sottolineava, ma ne parleremo anche alla fine proprio con l'esperienza di Vitevis, è fondamentale che poi ci sia sempre più la possibilità di contare, di avere elementi concreti per testimoniare concretamente l'investimento e quindi la realtà in sostenibilità. L'altro aspetto importante con cui ha chiuso, diciamo, questa prima domanda è che c'è una facilitazione da parte, diciamo, dei negozi, dei tantissimi shop del Systembolaget in giro per la Svezia, per facilitare i loro clienti a comprendere già nello scaffale quelle che sono le caratteristiche di quel prodotto sostenibile, a testimonianza di quanto diceva appunto prima anche Giulio Somma, che la confusione è molta e quindi anche i distributori, in questo caso il monopolio, deve agevolare la comprensione da parte dei consumatori, facendo meglio comprendere quali sono i tanti diversi aspetti, diciamo, del vino sostenibile che poi i consumatori svedesi vanno ad acquistare. Ok, sorry Sarah for just to give us some other minutes about it, but I wanted to point it out, something important you said. Have you got, at the moment in the Systembolaget, the percentage of the sustainable wines, not only organic, but in the different wave of organic production, sustainable production? Can you give some data, some figures about it?
Obviously, this is important because you need to know as a producer or supplier to Systembolaget that it's worth investing in these new, more sustainable products. So I just told you that we are still 25, more than 25, I think it was 25.6% of the wines being sold in volumes are organic. So obviously that makes a difference. And if you're not in organic, you will lose market share possibly. So when we talk about the climate efficient packaging, now almost 60% and 2 more percentages than last year is on any other packaging except glass bottles. So 60% of wines sold are in more sustainable packaging than glass bottles. When it comes to our sustainable choice, in March, 15% of the wines sold got a sustainable choice etiquette on the shelf. And now in August, it's 18.6%. So only in 6 months, we increased by quite substantial. And if you look at the number of products in March, we had 200, and now in September, there are 270. So there are a lot of producers converting to being in line with the requirements for sustainable choice.
Thank you, Sarah. Just translate a couple of minutes. Sì, ha spiegato quelli che sono alcuni dati abbastanza eclatanti su quello che è oggi la percentuale di vini, in questo caso organic wine, cioè quindi vini biologici, che ormai rappresentano il 25,6% delle vendite, diciamo, del Systembolaget. Questo è già un dato importante, ma la cosa ancora più interessante è proprio riferita anche a quelli che oggi possiamo definire vini sostenibili, che sono all'interno di una serie di diverse certificazioni, in particolare quelli legati al packaging. Sul tema dei packaging sostenibili io credo che dovremmo anche qui fare una lunga riflessione per laicizzare gran parte di alcune resistenze che oggi ci sono anche all'interno di alcune denominazioni, ma questo è un altro argomento, che per loro rappresentavano a marzo un 15% delle loro vendite nella rappresentanza dei loro negozi, sono già saliti in 6 mesi al 18,6% e un assortimento di prodotti che erano 200 prodotti e sono diventati 270, cioè quindi a testimonianza che ormai è un processo, diciamo, continuo, legato alla spinta certo del consumatore svedese, ma anche all'adeguamento da parte di sempre di più aziende che sono o già oggi pronte in una fase ovviamente di conversione per rispondere al meglio a quella che è la domanda del Systembolaget, dettata comunque dai consumatori del suo paese. Ok, Sarah. Thank you. I have the last question, because of course we already talked in this conference about also the the perspective in the future about the sustainable wines, but also if the consumer are ready to spend a little bit more about sustainable wines. From your point of view, what do you think? The Swedish consumer, they are prepared to spend a little bit more, or sustainable now is something that consider essential? So they don't want to spend more, but they consider to buy sustainable wines something essential for their lifestyle, and as you said before, because they think that it's possible in some way to save the planet.
I think it's both. It's both essential as well as something the Swedish consumer are prepared to. And what we've seen, not the least during the pandemic, is that when you are not going to restaurants, you are entertaining at home, you tend to put more into the wine you are buying for your home consumption. And it's going to be very interesting to see now when we go into more of a recession. The economic situation are different than it's been before. And what we haven't seen before, it's obviously that we have an inflation at the same time as we have the economy going down. So, but normally during lower economic times in Sweden, having a rather stable economy, generally speaking, is that you don't go to restaurants as much, but you do tend to entertain at home, and you do tend to buy something more exclusive. And then I think it is good times also for the more sustainable products. So I would say that keep up the good work with Equalitas and Viva. No, maybe I should stop there before I continue. I have a little bit sort of finishing off.
Sì, ha ricordato giustamente come anche da loro le crisi economiche hanno un impatto, e quindi anche l'inflazione c'è anche sul mercato svedese, e questo da un lato inciderà comunque anche nella disponibilità economica del consumatore svedese. Allo stesso tempo, cosa che la pandemia aveva già evidenziato in maniera forte, questo spostamento dal fuori casa verso un maggior consumo in casa può anche portare dei benefici, a una disponibilità magari di acquistare vini anche sostenibili da consumare a casa, e ovviamente lì il prezzo può essere più interessante rispetto a quanto poi magari uno è disponibile nelle condizioni di fare di acquisto ovviamente in un ristorante o comunque nel fuori casa, anche se ha confermato che in termini di prospettiva questo è un processo assolutamente inarrestabile, perché nella coscienza, nella percezione di un numero sempre più vasto di consumatori in Svezia, l'importanza di un acquisto di un prodotto che in qualche misura sia sostenibile, faccia bene alla salute del pianeta, è un qualcosa di forte. Ok, Sara,
Yeah, before finishing off, I know time is running out. I would just like to say, please continue working with the Viva and the Equalitas certifications that you have in Italy. I think it's very important to have certifications so that we can rely on the what we put on the label or what we say that wine live up to. Work with harmonizing the certifications with other schemes around the world. That's also something we try to be an engine in doing in order to make it more easy for the consumer in the end, because that's important. And continue delivering good organic wines and help us to cut the emissions in the supply chain, both when it comes to packaging, but also to cultivation and production. And do you have any sort of feedback or any ideas on that? Please be in contact with us.
Thank you, Sarah. Really, thank you. It was really a pleasure, and you gave us a good help to understand better what's going on in Sweden, but also to encourage us to follow the sustainable production in Italy that we are very involved at the moment. So for us, it's very important to have your point of view. So really, thank you.
I also, in the chat, I also gave where you can read more about what we do on sustainability in English on our website. So it's omsystembolaget.se/English.
Oh, thank you. Thank you also for this information. I will give that to also our audience. Thank you. As you soon, maybe next time in Italy. So it will be really fine. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Take care.
Sì, nell'ultima parte...
In the very last and significant part of her contribution, Sarah Norrell highlighted the Italian protocols as being very important. One is Equalitas, in order to get to sustainable productions. And she also identified the need to harmonize more. This is what Giulio also said. We are doing a work in this respect. Mrs. Norrell also stated that we should harmonize regulations and legislation not only at national level, but also at international level, which is an even bigger challenge. You know that in Sweden there is a monopoly, and that, of course, though, is connected with the rest of the world. She congratulated Italy with the outcomes in terms of sustainable wine growing and organic wine growing. In their website, Systembolaget has a section about their requests and requirements and expectations for sustainable productions, and where you can also receive indications about what they mean by sustainable wines. This is important to communicate to wine drinkers in Sweden. Thank you, and thank you to Giulio as well. We normally take for granted a number of things, but clearly when we speak about sustainable farming, there are agronomic topics and elements which are key and essential. I would kindly ask to join me here on stage Davide Raffaetta, who will address us on this. You see, one fundamental element is that sustainability is real when it is feasible. Disseminating an idea of sustainability that cannot be put in practice in wine growing is extremely dangerous, which is what greenwashing does, because they create a number of expectations that are not feasible at all, that are not viable. And I repeat that that is very dangerous. Davide Raffaetà from Noi Compensiamo will address us on sustainable wine growing and its possible contribution to fighting climate change, which has such a strong impact on vineyards. Thank you, and thanks to Vitevis for the kind invitation. Clearly, farming can contribute to fighting climate change, and that derives from the first asset in farming, which is soil, the land. I will try and explain this briefly. There is a video telling us about that, and we let you enjoy the English subtitles. Who can read them to you? Do you feel hopeless about climate change and the damage we are doing to our planet? I did, but then I was shown a new way to look at the problem, a perspective whose solution is obvious, whose solution is right under our feet. Global warming is produced by the excess of carbon present in the atmosphere. Carbon is not our enemy. It is the building block of life. Everything alive is made of it. It's us. The problem and the solution are simply a matter of balance. Let's step back and look at the 5 pools where carbon is stored on planet Earth. Starting about 500 million years ago, when plants came onto land, carbon began to cycle in an amazing balance between these pools, a balance that allowed for life as we know it to evolve. Then one life form, us, figured out how to extract carbon from pools. We have been burning it for energy. Putting it into play, we disrupted that balance. The way we manage land is moving even more carbon from the soil and biosphere into the atmosphere. Specifically, we have moved 880 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is heating up the planet and destabilizing our climate. Now, oceans have absorbed a lot of this excess carbon, which is resulting in ocean acidification and accelerating a mass extinction of sea life. So, in order to save life as we know it, of course, we have to stop releasing fossil carbon. The big question is, where do we put this excess carbon, to the surplus carbon, to get the cycle back into a balance? Remember when I said that the solution was right under our feet? It literally is. It is the soil. Plants with sunlight and water perform photosynthesis. They pull carbon and fix it and turn it into carbohydrates, sugars. Then they pump some of the sugars down through their roots to feed microorganisms who use that carbon to build soil. And the carbon has been moved. The plants pump it in it, and the soil stores it. Nature's living technology is amazing. Scientists have recently discovered that by applying a thin layer of compost one time, this sets up an ongoing cycle that brings more and more carbon into the soil each year. Together with other regenerative practices like not tilling the soil, planting trees, and using cover crops and plant grazing, we can build and retain gigatons of soil carbon. This is carbon farming. This is regenerative agriculture or agroecology. Isn't it marvelous when the solution arrives at the right moment? Unlike carbon in the atmosphere, more carbon in the ground is good for us. It makes healthy soil, which is nutrient-rich and full of life and holds way more water. This means more nutritious food and crops that are more resilient. That's good news for farmers, families, and for all consumers. Remember, the way we grow our food, fiber, and fuel either puts carbon up into the atmosphere or pulls it down into the ground. The regeneration of soil is the task of our generation. Our health, the health of our soils, and the health of our planet are one and the same thing. We saw, therefore, in this short video how important the soil is and what soil can do to contrast climate change. Only if you have a soil rich in carbon will you have of the benefits. It is the foundation for farming and good produce and then products. It retains and preserves biodiversity. It actually hosts 1/4 of the biodiversity of the planet. By capturing carbon, soils help combat climate change. In addition to that, we can also work for water, meaning that water is filtered, stored, and then released in a more correct way when actually plants need it. How can we then help this process and support this process? These good practices are various, and they derive from ancient practices, farming practices. Some are well known to all of us. Cover crops so that the soil is not left naked. Then the pruning remains are included in the soil. We reduce tillage, even no tillage is an option, and biochar is used, which is by 80% carbon. All this helps improving the soil, and the plants derive benefits from that. What about benefits? The advantages entail protection against erosion, less use of water, which means less consumption and therefore savings, which can translate into an economic saving for farmers. We improve biodiversity of the soil with a series of additional advantages. It is also possible to have carbon credits, which are a financial instrument per se, which give the possibility of neutralizing emissions of producers that otherwise would have no possibility to do that after emissions have been created. And this is what we did with Vitevis, because clearly, since we see to the management of farming soils, the good practices by Vitevis are deployed. We did that with 90 farmers, and that has led to a positive balance. What I mean is that we made a balance, including emissions deriving from the usage of fertilizers, chemicals, fuels, and the storage of carbon in the soil. The balance was positive, meaning that the soil stored carbon. Basically, agriculture, therefore, has the possibility of contributing to climate change. We only need to spread good practices, these good practices, to the entire farming sector. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Davide. Thank you also for being so brief. Well, we had agreed that I should be brief, so thank you also for being sustainable from that viewpoint. I would say that oftentimes we underestimate the role of farming in the various forms for sustainability, including the reaction to climate change today. We spoke about that with colleagues before the conference, and we actually said that our impression is that, and what I'm about to say is related to policies, of course. So I was saying we have the impression that farming in general lately has gone beyond the political perspective, which is something which might also be a source of concern because of role of farming in protecting the environment in all its forms, including the social aspects related to nutrition, which were recalled earlier on, and also in relation to drinking moderately. All these aspects are very important, and yet it seems that politicians and decisions makers have not grasped the important role performed by farming and wine growing specifically. There is an economic value attached to that. Now, I kindly ask whether the next speaker is connected. She is indeed. And the next speaker is actually Professor Sobrero, Rossella Sobrero from Coinetica. It might be that you were not with us from the beginning, but you have been quoted several times. Giulio Somma from Corriere Vinicola actually defined you the most important expert, the best expert of the communication of sustainability, and I agree with him. I would like to underline the fact that today, of course, we are fully aware of the difficulty of making sustainability communicated and clear. Also because consumers, we see, are not so sensitive to sustainability. Now, how can we counter that? So what can you tell us about the real situation in communication, and specifically the communication of sustainability? I don't know whether you see the wonderful venue we are in Vicenza. It's a wonderful theater. We hope to have you here in person next time. Well, I will be very happy to be with you in Vicenza next time, because Vicenza is, by the way, wonderful, a wonderful city. I hope I have soon the possibility of coming to Vicenza. I actually followed the initial part of the proceedings, and I also heard what Giulio Somma said about the CSR Salon in Milan, which is now concluded. Well, I'm not the expert or a great expert, but it is true that I've been working in the field for 20 years. I've been a believer from the start, so to say. I must say, though, that over the years, several other colleagues went into depth of the topics of sustainability. I'm not the only expert here. I would like to start with and from greenwashing, which I believe is one of the most important problems that we are tackling. And I wrote a book, which is now in bookshops, which is entitled Verde anzi verdissimo, green, very green. And it underlines the need to communicate sustainability in the correct way, in a correct way. Now, our concern is that this word becomes meaningless because we abuse of it. It is overused. On the one hand, this makes damage to the entire market, including organizations that work well. And on the other, this raises confusions and uncertainties among consumers. We need to speak out clearly about this topic, We should also avoid too much emphasis, because this creates a background noise which makes it impossible for consumers to grasp the real message. So, do you think that there can be specific ways by which we should communicate? You mentioned your book. Do you think that there are ways to make this topic more understandable in order also to evidence the commitment of an organization for sustainability? I did not focus specifically on wine, but since I love wine, for sure I will focus on that in order to go more into depth of possible suggestions and recommendations for transparent, correct, and empathetic communication. We should always remember that creating empathy is always key when promoting, on the one side, a product and those buying it on the other. It is something which should not be neglected. One rule, if you like, which is fundamental and easy at the same time, is that of telling only what you could actually achieve without making declarations which are emphatic only or generic. Rather, you should really tell what your estate has done in terms of improving the process and the product. Then there is another recommendation that I would like to give, and it is the following. Storytelling is fine. Empathy can also be created in that way, but story doing comes before storytelling. So you need to first do, then tell. And sustainability, of course, is a process. This is what we need to make clear. Being able of communicating the effort in an environmental and social domain is highly convincing for users who become more suspicious and more critical and better able to look for information, search for information before purchasing something in full awareness of what is being bought. So please tell only what you actually have done. Do you have any example that you might share with us, also going beyond the wine sector, which you think is credible in terms of a process of communicating sustainability? Well, the best known example is that of Patagonia. As you possibly know, it was one of the very first businesses in the United States and in the world to become a benefit corporation. Of course, this entailed that the company, the corporation, managed to declare what it would do for the environment and for the community in the bylaws. And they have been very effective at communicating. They had a campaign saying, "Do not buy this jacket." If this jacket this old jacket that you have can still be repaired, do so rather than purchasing a new jacket. This means pushing for reusing things. I like very much this idea of repairing things. They were so good in communicating and so credible. And recently, they made a further step and stated that the most important stakeholder is the environment. Of course, it is a different sector. I realize that. But you see, leading companies in their sectors are those that should give the line. Sustainability is not simply a wild card that you can use in order to win easily. Sustainability is something that must change the attitude and behavior of a business. We are judged not only out of what we say, but of what we do. And that goes for people as well, not only for organizations. There is another thing that actually I'm interested in, because you see, oftentimes we picture an idea of consumer, citizen, and society increasingly aware of sustainability. And that also includes the civic and social commitment that businesses have to adopt in order to meet new needs. Is it a picture that is simply comfortable and so we went for it, or is it really down to earth? Is it really so that consumers pay more attention to environmental topics and aspects? Well, much depends on the group of users and consumers we talk about. When it comes to youth, if properly educated, we do find that awareness. My university students are critical, they are responsible, they are suspicious, and that is good. We see that from surveys as well, but unfortunately not all youth is like that. There is still a large portion of young people who are not aware. So perhaps we are exaggerating when saying that young generations are or have a vocation for sustainability, or that sustainability for them is an assumption. It is a requirement or a precondition. It is not so. Young people actually appreciate sustainability and are more eager to work for an employer of a company where their values are a priority. That is for sure. That it is a phenomenon that we see. But we have also other consumers. You see, there are also those who speak about people of different age groups that made sustainability a life choice, and they are consumer activists. They are activists, as I said, not so much in terms of boycotting things, and this is something that we saw with Nike or Nestle and many others. So we're not talking about that here, but it is consumers who choose and reward businesses that are sustainable, and that can evidence that through certification, as was mentioned earlier on. So serious businesses, this is what I mean. In these terms, I'm fairly optimistic. I would say that the number of people who vote with the wallet, as Professor Becchetti says, will grow. We all can make a choice that has an impact on business strategies. We know that the strategies of corporations entails that trends be understood and embraced, and this leads to change. This is a time of metamorphosis, of transformation rather than change, which means that we question all the certainties that we had until a few years ago. What happened in the past 3 years showed to us that our certainties indeed should be questioned. I have a last question to you, Professor Sobrero. You are absolutely committed vis-à-vis the content that should be part of communication of sustainability. And yet I have a question about the instruments that are used to communicate. You mentioned consumer activists earlier on who use digital tools, create very lively communities. So what is the impact of digital instruments in this respect, the more traditional ones, when getting a message through for sustainability in an effective way? Well, tools and instruments should be used in an integrated way, meaning that you do not only go for the presence on social media, neglecting events or other things, and the other way around. I believe strongly in sustainability reports, because these have turned from being a reporting and accounting tool to being a means for communication, whereby you tell not only investors but citizens at large what the business is doing, what the corporation is doing. We have organized the Oscar ceremony for sustainability for a number of years together with University La Bocconi. And we have seen that sustainability reports are key in this respect. Specifically, I think that they are convincing if they state what objectives have not been met yet. This makes them credible. Telling things in a positive way is correct, finding the right words to do so, and yet telling also what objectives and goals have not been met, also due to external factors, is important, because this is a message of, or an evidence rather, of being transparent. This means that you want to involve and engage people in order together to meet objectives. You also have to fix deadlines to do so. This is one instrument. Digital communication is certainly key. We can't do otherwise today. I believe, though, also very much in internal instruments, the ethical code, environmental policies, policies on human rights, and so on and so forth. All these tools, if used properly, can help a corporation to defend against accusations of greenwashing, which is a major step forward, I think. Thank you so much. Your contribution has been precious. Thank you so much. And I hope that there are new opportunities to exchange views on this topic that has been the core of your work for many years now. This is fundamental to testify to the credibility of many organizations also in the wine sector that deserve to be visible because they are working so well. Thank you. Thanks to you, of course. Thank you. I think that Professor Sobrero as well contributed very nicely to shedding light on the multifaceted situation when it comes to sustainability, also in terms of communicating effectively. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to call on stage the hosts, Alberto Marchisio, and possibly also Davide Mascalzoni. Davide Mascalzoni has been the mind behind the organization of this event, and we wanted to have conclusions with the organizers, and then Carlo Petrini will conclude the meeting. Their experience is what brought us here this morning to Teatro Comunale di Vicenza. Thank you very much, Alberto. You have the floor. Thank you. Thanks to you for accepting, this invitation, which is very important to us. It is important because it is the first time, possibly, that Vitevis, since its start, is doing to a larger audience. So far, we simply focused on working and laying the foundation to tackle this sector, which so profoundly needs innovation and cooperation. Hence, our deep gratitude for this event and for this start together. Now, I would like to tell you a bit about Vitevis. Possibly you do not know where the name comes from. Vitevis, as a name, was chosen as a name in 2015, making reference to Latin vitae-vis, meaning the strength of the vine, which translates into the strength of a group of people, of a cooperative, with a view of making it possible for these people to speak. It is 1,350 wine growers, 2,800 hectares of vineyards, which is a significant number, and every year the harvest is that of 50,000 tons of grapes. In addition to finding the name, a logo or symbol should also be found. We wanted to bring together the place, the tradition, and innovation. We looked at the drawings by Palladio when drawing La Rotonda, and we thought that that layout was really a representative symbol for us. So that was the starting point. That was the inspiration. We included there that V letter, which is a sort of simplified version of a bunch of grapes. You see, we wanted to go down to the essence, and the essence in vine growing and wine making is what the Vitruvian man indicated. That is to say, that tradition is key, and this is where we have to find our roots. And our roots are in the soil. We need then to combine innovation with innovation in the cellar, in the production, in order to make our consumers happy. So this is the map that I would like to use as a reference. This is our introduction. Here you see our cooperatives that we decided to include with all their traditions and history. And you see also the specificities of each and every cooperative. Figures and numbers are possibly less important than ideas, and yet they do count. And here they are. Here you have a summary, 1,350 wine growers, 12 million bottles, 110,000 barrels, 1,000 tanks, because we also sell to other producers who, thanks to the wine coming from our producers, have the possibility of bringing wine to the rest of the world. 4 cellars, 3 blotting lines, 2 drying lots, 2 barrel lofts, 49 appellations, 5 certifications. So this is a very important package. I repeat it, 5 certifications, 65 million turnover. Before going more into detail, I would like to thank all our people for working with such a determination, and the board for accepting the challenge that we took. It is not so that we waited for others to act. We acted, and I would like to thank members for contributing to the various projects. Now, this project, Good Wines for the Earth, started in 2013 with a number of electronic registries. We had actually asked members of the cooperatives to write into a portal, enter into a portal, what they did in the vineyard in terms of procedures, fertilization, irrigation, everything. Then, in 2015, Vitevis was founded. In 2017, we had the first certification, SQNPI, then the Grigio project in 2021, energy diagnosis, same year, the Equalitas certification, 22, and then GHG in 2022 with the relevant certification. There is an LCA project which is in progress, and the sustainability report. You see also green investments on this slide, at the bottom of the slide. At first, we had investment related to producing energy with the photovoltaic systems. Then, in 2019, actually, we developed more awareness of all these points and decided we would unite them and present them in a harmonious way, which paved the way to all certifications, including the carbon credits. SQNPI. What is it? It is a national system recognized by the ministry and indeed the board supported this certification procedure with incredible results. 202 member cooperatives and 1,400 hectares in 2022, which are added to the organic farming. We were authorized by the ministry as a corporation to be a controller. And this is something which is very important for us. We didn't want to be too aggressive with our approach. We didn't want our cooperatives to have an excessively strong impact, which means that we control and also foster culture, the culture of certification among our members, thanks to the work of farmers and of an additional entity that controls us. Grigio is the name of the project. Gris, from Pinot Gris. This is the outcome of the will to try and understand better the way by which water is used, the way by which we can tackle this in the near future, because climate change entails that seasons have changed. We decided to start with them from Pinot Gris, because in past years, many different productions were rotated in a way which was detrimental for planning. While we do have the need to plan, we searched for a partner, which is FCP Cerea. In 2012, starting with 10 cooperatives, we started the project. Now there are as many as 42 involved. We use a system of satellite monitoring and we cover 110 hectares. What about the important elements here? The first one is awareness in irrigating, and then fertilization and vigor. We use satellites to make forecasts. We cross data coming from weather stations that we have in the area. Scans are made every 4 days by satellites, and we see in each and every vineyard what is actually happening. With the help of an agronomist, or rather a group of agronomists, then we go to the vineyard and see what this type of vineyard is doing and how it is behaving. In this way, we can indeed identify the way to go.
So our purpose is to develop an irrigation newsletter in a couple of years. Today, we exchange text or email to suggest what the best PPP is, plant protective product. And also, we would like to give suggestions as to the best time to irrigate. This is going to be very successful. We are reaping good results, and I fully believe that thanks to technologies and thanks to the right people, we can get there. Equally important is the fact that we went for the equalitas certification that was largely discussed before. We work with a number of wineries, and we usually pick one winery to taste something. This is the beauty of being a family. Since we have a network of members, we have a certified Montecchio Maggiore next year. It is Castelnuovo's turn. Little by little, we are going to certify all wineries. Well, there are 3 pillars to the Equalitas certification, and pillar is the right definition. A pillar is something that suggests stability. I mean, a pillar is stable. And we do all that because we want to ensure a better future. We need to be able to incorporate any inspiration coming from our members. So social, economic, and environmental pillars, these have been discussed already. Thanks to SQNPI, thanks to monitoring our members' vineyards, we were granted this certification. So this is a very lofty target indeed. Over the past years, we have monitored irrigation, fertilization, crop plan, and machine fleet, use of fuels in 90 members and 700 hectares. We could generate 4,700 700 spared CO2, and so we have overcome the initial target. We have done better than our initial target. So this is one of the most interesting goals, because you see, when we started collecting data, we became able to take measurements and monitor the situation, and we can use the credits in our final product. We are going to market bottles where the carbon impact is neutral, zero. So, and we will do that extensively. Something like 3 million bottles, which is quite a lot, if well, in our industry. Here comes another project which is on the home stretch, and I'm talking about Montecchio Maggiore winery. The project is LCA. Production is monitored, and the impact of all inputs is assessed. Well, bottle, cork, transportation, energy, and other similar inputs. So we can use carbon credits at best, because using reused materials can we minimize the need for carbon credits. Now about investments. Diagnosis as first. It's essential to know where one stands in order to figure out what remains to be done. You can't work without data. Diagnosis was done, then monitoring, and then actions that I'm going to list to you. Now, the investments that were made in order to obtain energy from photovoltaics started in 2010. This proves that individual wineries were sensitive enough to the renewables. In 2011, other investments. 2022, more investments. And also, we expect many more for next year. So the active power expected is 1 megawatt per hour. Well, you have to measure how much you've spared. So reduced consumptions have been our key, starting from the bottling line, and also refrigeration units that are very energy consuming. So our raw material is grape, which is processed, and refrigeration units are very energy consuming. Also, new offices with improved energy classes. And also purification, water purification is another key subject. now today we can inflow or outflow clean water that can be reused. You see, we regret wasting water, especially at times when the weather is very dry. I mean, like was the case last year or these years in the summer. We have bought a truck in order to optimize freight. This is also very important. And we have taken on board 2 electric vehicles for material handling, and also we have 2 recharging columns on the spot. All this is measured. Here you can see the bar charts. As a result of investments, we should be able to decrease the consumption rates even more and obtain a 20% impact by PV photovoltaics. That's still little. However, we have used this sort of application as extensively as possible because we needed to have adequate surfaces, i.e. roofs. Now, it's not only a question of sustainability. In recent years, food-related standards have been introduced, and also rating di legalità and IMPS. They are 2 entities that are responsible for safe work. I mean, safety in the workplace is something that is near and dear to our hearts. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us, because we are inspired by your suggestions. We are trying different ways as a result to find out what works best. Thank you. Well, Alberto Marchisio, let me thank you for a number of reasons. First, because of your data, it proves quite clearly what it takes in order to communicate results in a transparent way. Professor Sobreros earlier on said that in communicating about sustainability, one should also state what we have failed to obtain. This adds to credibility and transparency. So, investing in sustainability is the only way to survive in the future. It's no longer an ideology. It is a pragmatic need. So Vitevis is doing the right thing in this regard, and this is, a good story for us journalists to tell about, not only for ethical reasons, which would be reason enough, but also because we want to attract other people to jump onto the wagon, not only because it is commercially viable, but because it is vital for the planet as a whole. So thank you very much, Alberto. So I wonder whether we have Carlo Petrini with us. Carlo, welcome. Well, introducing Carlo Petrini is difficult. It may take up all of the time allotted to him. his reputation is so long. He's the founder of the slow food movement, and also the University of the Food University in Pollenzo. I had the honor to teach there. He's also a free thinker about all the major subjects that have to do with farming, including sustainability, a subject that's very dear to him. So someone before you mentioned Laudato Si by Pope Francis that you defined as the compass for the planet. None better than you can draw some conclusions. The conclusion, and we acknowledge Vitevis for having us here to talk about sustainability. I mean, we tried to be as concrete as possible, but we know that you are very concrete. So we would like to hear your conclusive remarks, your vision of sustainability, how far we are, what needs to be done. We still consider this strategic and fundamental, but then it takes a long time, and you have a worldwide vision. It's essential. We can't speak of sustainability as a local item. So I give you the floor and speak freely. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And thank you for giving this opportunity to me to delve into this question of sustainability in the times we are living, ecological transition. Well, all of this is seen from the standpoint of one sector, wine. Three premises. First, the wine sector is the pinnacle of the entire food sector. That's the reason why choices and behaviors and strategies that the wine sector is deploying with regard to environmental sustainability are food for thought for other food subsectors. We shouldn't forget that the main generator of CO2 in the world is the current food system as a whole. Talking about CO2 production, the overall global food production system is responsible for 37% of CO2 generation. One tends to blame mobility, but this accounts for 17% versus 37% of the food industry. Today, you have discussed this subject very elegantly, and your practices are being looked up by non-wine sectors. Secondly, I'd like to share with you the origin of this word sustainable and sustainability. Well, these are invasive terms. They are applied to whatever you say or whatever you think. Everything must be sustainable. And the sustainability is the main strength of whatever we do. So I'd like to point out that these terms are overused or even abused. Well, in the Italian language, sustainable is connected to the verb sustain, meaning support in English. Many suggest that the current good practices have an impact and are financially sound or sustainable. So we are talking about economic sustainability. Well, let's state it clearly. This is not the actual meaning of sustainable. It comes from English, sustainable. And it comes from the verb sustain. Sustain is the pedal of the piano that makes a note longer. For instance, if you play a note, a particular sound is obtained. However, if while pressing the key on the keyboard at the same time you press the pedal of the piano, the sound becomes long. So the French are right. They translate sustainable with durable. So the very essence of sustainability is making sure that our behaviors, our actions, and our practices, be it individual, collective, corporate, institution, or association, well, as I said, our practices are to obtain durable results or long-lived results. So the results may be products or classes of products, but they can also be directions, for instance, social, political, or economic approaches, and the results must be more durable. So understanding this meaning amounts to understanding how disruptive the term sustainable is. Sustainability is not only good practices. There is more to it. These are economic, political paradigms other than the usual ones. The third point I'd like to draw to your attention is the following. So I'm thinking of a duality that we often use when we talk about good practices. So the duality is tradition versus innovation. I think we should get over this dualistic approach, whereby tradition looks back to the past and to the conservative practices, while innovation carries a more forward-looking approach. I think that innovation and tradition are talking to another all the time. I mean, they are not apart. They are constantly in contact. So innovation, for instance, may be well-established or successful tradition. Now, reproposing traditions in a new way is innovation. On the contrary, if I wanted to support traditions with no innovation, traditions will die away. You have to overcome this dualism in the tradition and innovation are helping one another. After these three premises, let me say that I was largely impressed, especially by the last presentation. I was impressed by the good practices that were implemented. Well, renewables, for instance, and also the reduction in CO2 generation and lower use of chemicals and plant protective products. These good practices, including water sparing and new ways of irrigation using modern technologies, well, such good practices are the very quintessence of actions that we take all the time. The production world has been quicker in adopting such approaches, quicker than the political spheres, for instance. Now, my contribution to this discussion is not just a question of listing good practices. This has been done, and indeed it is still going on. I'd like to say something about a philosophical approach. A philosophical approach. Concerning a winery set in a particular area, adopting new practices. But of course, new practices are taking place in a context where some distinctive features are the very building block of sustainability. I'd like to list 3 points that I consider essential. Now, a winery must be able to govern and implement the limits, the governance of limits. This is not easy. So, in our experience, a good commercial response is associated with an increased production. So we have entered an historical stage where the endless production is not credible, it's not tenable. Now, resources are finite. We know that, and good practices show that we can swallow fertile arable soils or water or the main resources of the planet. However, the very concept of endless growth is to be harnessed. So, a good winery, a good cooperative society, a good farm must be able to govern the limits or the boundaries. So up to a limit, the production develops a hand in glove with nature. So, and one must be aware of the philosophy of one's companies. If you trespass limits, problems expand in an exponential way. So the governance of limits applies to all of us. Then, second, is the maintenance and also the strengthening of biodiversity. I'm saying this because in the wine sector there are particular developments. A grape variety, a wine may be extraordinarily successful, and that grape, due to its very success at that very moment, dictates in increasing growth that takes space away from other grapes. For instance, I live in Piedmont, in an area called Langhe, and the extraordinary success of Barolo and Barbaresco in the area where I live is dominating all over the area. So Dolcetto and Barbera are uprooted. So this happened also for Prosecco and other historical grapes that has had a history and their own identity and their connection to the area. They disappear as a result of the success of a particular grape, but the success can be temporary. And as a result of the success of some grapes causes the demise of others. And this minimizes biodiversity as compared to other crops. If I'm thinking of the landscapes of the Langa where I live, if I think of the landscapes of my youth, where the grape lived together with weeds, and there were also little woods. Now the landscape is one and the same, vineyards only. Be careful, this is a loss of biodiversity. This, in the long term, you will pay this dear. And the producers will also pay a very dear price, because biodiversity will make sure that insects would live in the territory and discharge their roles. Today, all the little woods have given room to vineyards. this choice that one has to be made. I mean, biodiversity should be maintained. This is not an ethical, but it is a strategical choice. I'm telling you this because the success of one grape is time limited, and when its success story stops, then you don't have any other weapons to win back a biodiversity that has been present locally for centuries. So one has to fight for biodiversity. Then there is another point. Well, these points may sound general, but they are substantial. They are behaviors, they are indications. So these ideas may become a heritage of companies like the one who has just talked about their own good practices. A winery must be respectful of the land and of the local residents. In the boroughs or villages where vine growing is dominant, there are other citizens that have nothing to do with the vine growing. There are communities, and these communities have contributed to the production of many products, such as including grapes. However, if grapes become all invasive, if the impact of wine tourism becomes uniform, then a situation exists problems exist for the residents who don't work in the wine industry. Many of such villages are losing social living or networking. For instance, with the development of supermarkets and hypermarkets, so the so-called neighborhood shops have been obliged to close down, and also inns or wine bars where older people would gather to play cards. So the old inns have been replaced by three-star hotels, but the three-star hotels do not ensure the social living of the local residents. And also, the parishes don't exist anymore. So these villages are becoming just dormitories, and no one cares whether the village is entirely devoted to wine tourism. Because if tourism is supported by one component only, that is wine, this is a lost battle. Let me tell you that the wine production must have an impact that's not invasive, that must be in line and in keep with the history and the population of the place. I like saying that a sound tourism is dedicated to the happiness of the people living there. When I may visit a wine place if the residents are happy. They are happy to live under those conditions. If everything has been shaped according to the needs of tourism and the resulting turnover, I mean, this is dissatisfactory for me. So here comes my contribution, my suggestion to you. Please consider that the governance of limit, the maintenance of biodiversity, and the respect for the local populations of the lands where wineries exist. Well, these three items should never be forgotten. The more attention wineries give to these good practices, the more successful all other practices will be. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Carlo Petrini. He has addressed the key points about sustainability. So the origins of the world, the etymological origin, and the proper use of this term, not abusing or misusing it. And also what he said about the borders or limitations is very important. So that's the very start in order to implement good practices. I'd like to take up a bit more of your time. So it is very late, especially in Veneto, where in the past people used to have a lunch early. You've been the developer of Terra Madre. The theme of sustainability is closely linked to the difficulties of other parts of the world to be sustainable. How can you reconcile this lack of balance? I know it is a complex question and you only have a few minutes. Can you please say a few things? The real problem is that there is no such a thing as an international governance, and the themes facing up requires different responses between different areas. For example, the decrease in animal proteins as compared to plant proteins, that is the reduction in the consumption of meat. This is a good practice that we have to enhance. In this country, 95 kilograms per head per year. It is an incredibly high number. When I was young, 50 years ago, the per head consumption in Italy was 40 kilograms. Now, in my generation, there was indeed food security. In that period, in the 50s and 60s, Italians have eaten better than ever, before and after, since the intensive production of meat is one of the main reasons for an increase in the CO2 emissions, something needs to be done about it. "130 kilograms in the United States. If all people on Earth would eat so much meat, it would take 3 planets to feed the animals that we want to eat. So it's a question of a shrinkage. Many eat too much water, and the others eat too little. In the sub-Saharan Africa, the per head consumption rate is 5 kilograms per year. Well, you can't decrease the amount of meat under such circumstances. At the same time, since there is no international governance on these things,
per portarne molti altri, non c'è una governance internazionale, è importante che le società.
since there isn't an international governance in all countries, civil societies, through individual or collective behaviors, through schools and education, they must make sure that these recommendations are applied. So knowing what is taking place in other parts of the world would make us aware that we are responsible of 2 injustices. The first is an interrelational. The world that we're going to pass down to the following generation is not the one we found. It's going to be worse. And this is injustice towards the future generations. And the second one is that the developed world, our world, has been responsible for the increase in the generation of CO2, talking about climate change, by 80%. So the injustice that we are responsible for is paid by the third world. They will pay more, they will pay dear, the south of the world, which is not responsible for it. It's not the cause of it. They are the victims of it. So you must be aware that this injustice exists exactly now.
Bene Carlo, ti ringrazio anche a nome di tutti i presenti.
Thank you, Carlo. I thank you also on behalf of all attendees in this beautiful theatre in Vicenza. I hope we are having you again in person next time. This time it was bound to be online. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for your extraordinary activity. May you live long. God bless you.
Bene, congedato sicuramente il bravo Carlo Petrini. Non so, Alberto, io credo che prima di andare al buffet che ci aspetta fuori, però qualche domanda o qualche altro.
I wonder whether there are more questions before we break for lunch. We have listened to so much. I mean, I have many thoughts on my mind, but I have spoken at length. I wonder whether there are questions from the floor. If you have questions or comments, you have this chance to do it. I have promised Aurelio that I would allow him to share with us his reflections.
Cercare il suo nome su Spotify, anzi ce lo deve.
By the way, look up for his name in Spotify. He has a very interesting podcast, and you can listen to him when you're driving. Yes, there is a podcast, Stories from the Markets. I tell stories about corporations, markets, talking about businesses. Dear growers, I'd like to share a story with you. It is the result of the research work I'm doing on a daily basis in museums and libraries. You are fully aware of the importance of your role as entrepreneurs and farmers in the social fabric. That's clear. So I'm here not only to compliment you or congratulate you, but I'd like to urge you to interpret your role as a partner in a different way. Studying the history of wine and vine, I discovered something that has impressed me and helped me to review the functions of people like you. It's a story that has to do with India. Well, India and wine don't often go together. But in the past, that was the case. There was a thriving trade. Well, India has been a chimera for us, for Alexander the Great and Trajan, the emperor, strove to reach India. Well, Trajan tried to reach India. When he got to Mesopotamia, he said, I am too old, or I would reach India.
Tanto di guerra, purtroppo, spesso è frutto di pura vanità.
War is the result of sheer vanity. These words by Trajan prove this point. But there is a Roman that got to India, Marcus Livius Cassius from Rome. And he was a grower, and he was in the habit of branding his amphoras or vases with a logo. These amphoras have been digged out by archaeologists in different parts of the Mediterranean basin, Italy, Lebanon, and other Mediterranean countries. These logoed amphoras with these names have been found in India.
Senza bisogno.
He got to India without any army and without any soldiers, with no war machines, because you, men and women in the wine field, you are peace people, ambassadors of peace with your invaluable products. You not only sell joy to drinkers like us, but whenever you export a bottle of wine abroad, you become the ambassadors of sustainability, and you are ambassadors of peace. So up with Vitevis, up with wine, and thank you for what you do for all of us.
Grazie Aurelio, direi Alberto che...
Thank you, Aurelio. Now it is up to you to draw some very conclusive remarks. thanks to you and to Vitevis for organizing this very exciting morning.
Ringraziarvi. Voglio fare un attimo una sintesi da dove siamo partiti, nel senso che l'obiettivo era quello di di trovarci.
Our goal was to get together to understand each other more. I mean, it's not only a question of celebrating our achievements, it is a cultural event. This is what we had in mind. So it is up to us to decide whether we want to do it again. I think that pausing for a while and looking back is essential in order to be able to look forward. This is the first time. I wonder whether we can have more similar events. Well, thank you so much, and I'm pretty sure that we shall meet again.
Ci vediamo, continua la chiacchierata del buffet.
Now we are having a conversation over lunch. There are refreshments. Please feel free.